Welcome to another episode of Threads of Conversation, the podcast exploring the emotional and cultural stories we tell through style. I'm your host, Georgia Graham, and on today's episode we have designer Jawara Alleyne. Born in Jamaica but raised in the Cayman Islands, Jawara moved to London to study at Central St Martin's. After graduating, he was invited to join legendary talent incubator Fashion East, where he honed his signature deconstructed aesthetic. Sometimes called the safety pin polymath, Jawara has become known for his recognisable punk pirate style, one which has made him one of the UK's most exciting fashion talents. In 2024, Rihanna even called Jawara her new favourite designer. As his star continues to rise, I sat down with Jawara to discuss 8 items of clothing that chart his life and career in fashion. As always, you'll find pictures of his chosen pieces in the accompanying newsletter, which is linked in the show notes. If you enjoy the episode, then don't forget to like and subscribe on your chosen platform. And now, here are Jawara Alleyne's Threads of Conversation. Jawara, welcome to Threads of Conversation.
Thanks for having me.
How are you doing today?
I'm good. Today I'm good. How are you?
Yesterday not so good?
Yesterday was a very busy day. I mean, technically today is also a very busy day, but actually I think, when you're so tired and delirious that you're just like, okay, I'm just rolling through it.
Let's start with your first piece.
Uh-huh.
So this is the piece that reminds you of your childhood.
Yeah.
What have you chosen?
And I think this piece is an image from my childhood that, I guess it reminds me of my childhood because the piece was actually from my childhood. It's a suede jacket that I had when I was a kid. And I just remember this night. It was one of the few nights. I grew up in Jamaica with my family, with my grandmother and my cousins, and we all kind of lived in the same house. And in Jamaica, when it's Christmas, you have this big kind of, I guess, market that happens all across the island called Grand Market. Mm-hmm. And basically everybody goes out. It's like Christmas Eve and it's like super festive and everybody's out. There's super like lots of music and whatever. And everybody's just kind of hanging out. And it was one of those memories that you kind of look back and you're like, that was one of the last times where everyone was kind of together in a sense. And that was one of the surviving images from that night that I always look back and I was like, where is that jacket? Because that jacket was fab.
Can you describe it for us?
It's like a brown suede, almost kind of like a bomber jacket, almost kind of like this shape of the jacket that I'm wearing now. But it's a little bit more sporty because it's kind of suede. But I look back at it, I'm like, it kind of feels quite luxury. I don't know really where that jacket was from, but it felt really like one of those objects or those items that you would keep forever. And
this is so I've got the photo here. It's quite like, it's good pose. Like, you know how to take a photo even at that age.
I was a little bit of a nerd as a kid, or so like my style was it was sporty, but it was also kind of reserved and was also kind of a little bit, dare I say, demure. So I look back on it and I was really giving like chic.
Yeah. It's quite preppy in a way. You know?
It was almost a little bit preppy. It's like a little
mini Ivy League a little bit.
Yeah, without the bow tie. But it was very much, I think Jamaica has a lot of like neatness in its style because we don't really come from a lot of affluence. So it's not about like, I guess when you become older and you're more sort of in that space of expressing your identity, it becomes a lot more expressive. But in Jamaica, when you're in school, everybody wears a uniform. Mm-hmm. And the code that kind of holds value, I guess, is how neat you put yourself together. So how clean are your clothes? How neat are your clothes? Like, how does everything fit you? Mm-hmm. Can you go to the end of the day and still look the way you did at the beginning of the day? You know, those are the kind of rules that were at play at that time. And I guess, I was like really playing with that because the fit was very neat.
Mm. Going back to your childhood, can you give a quick sort of summary of where you grew up, how you ended up in London, what you were like as a kid?
So I grew up between Jamaica and the Cayman Islands. I was born in Jamaica. I left Jamaica when I was 12, and then I left Cayman when I was 19 to come to London. But when I was growing up in Jamaica, I would visit Cayman over the summers and like spend, basically once school would give out for the summer, which was like June, then I would be in Cayman until September. Mm-hmm. And then I moved to Cayman when I was 12 officially, and I was there. Then I would do the opposite thing where I'd come back to Jamaica for the summers. And then I left Cayman when I was 19 to move to London. And I've basically been here ever since.
Can you describe the difference between the style and the aesthetic and the vibe in Cayman and in Jamaica? Because I feel like there are two different things going on, and both of those now appear in your work.
Mm-hmm. So those are, I think it's a very important note, because the two for me couldn't be any more different when it comes to like the culture that holds the style within the space. So Jamaica is a lot more expressive. There's a lot more room for play when it comes to how people can dress to face the world. There's a lot more experimenting. There's a lot more dressing up. There's a lot more dressing down. There's a lot more opportunities that can hold stylistic expression. Whereas Cayman, the society is a lot more streamlined. People's lives are kind of mostly revolve around sort of like going to work and then like living a very like home-based kind of lifestyle or beach-based kind of lifestyle. So inevitably, Cayman is a lot more easy when it comes to how you put yourself together. Things needs to be a lot more lighter, a lot more freer, not as complex of dressing that like I think a place that is so culturally complex like Jamaica can hold. Like I remember in Jamaica, we have a lot of like people wear boots in Jamaica, people wear leather jackets, they wear leather coats. Like we have this historical icon who used to be a really huge innovator within the dancehall space called Bogle. And I think I took a lot of inspiration from him because he was inspired a lot by European ways of dressing. He was really inspired by punk. So he would always be wearing like black and leather and anything with like studs. And like I was really drawn to that point of view of how you can look to the East for inspiration and bring that back into a Caribbean culture in a way that feels engaging, compelling, exciting, also kind of like, I guess, very fitting to who that person was as well. Because I think what we do with fashion and with style is that you propose options for people to find themselves within. So even though, yes, punk and the rules and codes that held punk was a very sort of London-based idea, as an identifier and as an identity, it's something that I think a lot of other people can relate to, because punk as a movement was very similar to reggae as a movement as well. So I think that is one person that I think like really sort of like defines the difference of how Jamaica allows you to sort of like play around with different rules. You can look at inspirations from anywhere and you can pull that into a context within Jamaica that allows you to find yourself. Whereas Cayman, because it's such a streamlined society and it's also, the space is not that big, the dressing and the rules and the codes that are in play are so much more streamlined. But yeah, I think that's the kind of difference in engagement that between Jamaica and Cayman. And now I think like it's very interesting because even within that, there's the complexity of like pirate histories that I'm always looking at, and how in terms of storytelling, we really have that legacy within Cayman where a lot of our cultural narratives and storytelling surrounds pirates, but also just surrounds like being underwater in general. In reality, there were probably more pirates in Jamaica than there were in Cayman. And it really kind of shows in the style, because you know the elements of leather and boots and the way that people are putting themselves together, the tailoring that exists within Jamaica is so much more pulling on that history and the ways that the pirates used to dress back in the day. And the kind of dialogue between those two spaces that are so close to each other but so different, but still share a history, is always what I'm trying to engage in my work. And also how that story between Jamaica, Cayman, then also correlates with London, which I'm now based, but a lot of our history and the moments that I'm looking at stylistically of the things that kind of gave us a sense of style or rules that we could pull on, like punk histories, is coming from London as well. So it's kind of like all of these three spaces that I'm kind of looking at, okay, what is the dialogue and the back and forth between London and Cayman? What is the back and forth dialogue between Jamaica and Cayman? What is the dialogue between Jamaica and London?
kind of leads us onto your second piece. So this is the piece that reminds you of your career. So can you describe this piece for me?
So the piece is the final look from my last show at Fashionista. And it is a marigold two-piece maxi skirt with a sort of bikini style tube top with a kind of like referencing the sun almost, with kind of like straps that go across the top area, the torso area. And that piece for me, I guess, reminds me of my career, because it was the first time when I looked at something that I did and I was like, you fucking did that. Because it moved so incredibly. And I think I'm always like pulling on something that when you look back at your work, you're not really sure if it really got to the thing that the exact thing that you had in your head.
I always think of it as the translation.
Yeah.
Because you see it in your mind, and part of the thing about learning to be a successful creative is almost making that translation totally seamless. So you see it in your head and you can produce it in the world, either as a physical object, or you can write it or make it into a piece of music. And it was funny, I was interviewing a friend the other day who, she's a sort of artisan photographer, and she said that the moment she realised that translation didn't happen automatically when she was a kid, was like she was so crestfallen because she was trying to draw something and she realised that she needed to hone this skill in order to be able to represent on a page what she saw in real life.
Right. I think there's a lot of like creatives that sort of forget that line of kind of how just because you have an idea doesn't make it good, but also just because you do it doesn't make it good either. There's like a consistent dialogue that you need to be having with your own work to kind of question whether the idea of a thing that you have in your head and what you actually produce, if those two things kind of line up.
What are the questions that you're asking yourself when you're assessing your work and figuring out whether it feels right for you?
Essentially, it's like with any project and with any garment, with any collection, you set the intention for what you're aiming to explore. And whatever those intentions are is how you kind of then go back and question it. The questions are less concrete questions and more feelings for me, in my case. It's like, does it feel the way that all of the references that I have in my head are coming together?
I really love what you were talking about before with that sort of triangulation of the three different cultures. It's so fascinating when you think about that and you look at your work, because there's that sort of almost like sun-bleached Jamaican energy to it. But then it's also very carefully constructed, and sort of there is a simplicity to it because a lot of the pieces are based on t-shirts or they're made of cotton. And that sort of refers back to what you were saying about Cayman. And then you have this amazing punk pirate energy with the safety pins, and almost, I was looking and I was thinking, some of your pieces, they're a bit like skeletons because you have the ribs. And it's sort of, again, this is, I guess you hear other people interpreting things in your artwork, so tell me if it's wrong or right. But it sort of also felt, when I was thinking about the relationship between these cultures, and obviously like Britain and the Caribbean, all these like skeletons in the closet and stuff, like there were just so many images coming out of these supposedly quite simple pieces. And I just found that so fascinating. The question in there is, how do you describe your work?
I guess it depends on who I'm talking to. I think with my work and with fashion, there's so many different conversations that you need to be able to have about your work, that it really depends on who's asking that question. Like if it was a buyer asking my question, I would, I guess, say something like, my work is deconstructing the idea and concepts of menswear and womenswear, and deconstructing the supply chain and the process of how you create and also sell collections. If I was, I guess, talking to someone that's more on the philosophical side of things or literature side of things, I would speak a little bit more about the philosophy of what I'm doing and how circular it is, and how my work essentially in practice is looking at the approach that Caribbean people have, which is that nothing ever goes to waste. Like I come from a culture that is every year somebody's island gets destroyed by a hurricane. And growing up like that, you really have a different relationship with materials that allows you to be a lot more holistic with the way that you treat materials and relate to materials.
Firstly, from a more practical standpoint, can you talk a bit about your methodology? So sourcing fabrics, how you put them together, and also any challenges in terms of scaling or production that come with that?
So there's definitely a lot of challenges when it comes to scaling, which is the stage that I'm in now. But before we got to scaling, I think for me, it was most important, especially because I started my work in COVID. It also gave me an opportunity to be honest with what my practice actually looked like. It was very important to establish a way of working that felt honest, that felt true to who I am, where I was. Like I came to London to go to fashion school and to become a fashion designer that could design on the level of, or produce a collection on the level of McQueen, Galliano, Margiela, Karl, Albert at L'Enfant. And all of my time up to my MA was about getting to that point of clarity in construction, in pattern cutting, like really developing that side of what I thought fashion was, because I've been watching fashion ever since I was a kid and looking up to these designers and kind of using them as a benchmark for success. So after I left, I did my MA show, which I think really aligned with those values of creating a collection that feels really like luxe and really clean. And then I left and it was COVID, and everyone was kind of scrambling of trying to figure out, okay, what the hell is going to happen with the industry? Nobody's going to get a job, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, well, I'm just going to lean into the skills that I know and what I already can do naturally. And that's kind of how that's how I started or restarted using these sustainable practices and circular practices within my work again. I think what has made my work so successful is how honest it is. The reason why I'm using dead stock is because that was what was accessible to me. I could only go to the fabric store around the corner to get stuff. So I really developed a way of working where, regardless of whether it's dead stock or not, I can still get to an outcome that is exciting, that is good, that is a garment that regardless of only being pinned together, it still has a sense of integrity and is exciting, and you kind of want to wear it. There's a lot of different research that I'm doing within the practice or the brand of Jawara Alleyne. And we have 3 different ranges that allows me to explore 3 different ways of thinking about fashion, creating fashion, selling fashion, communicating fashion.
What are the titles of the different collections?
So you've got Untitled by Jawara Alleyne, which is the one-off products that I make that I sell on Fantastic Toiles, and it drops when it drops. Then you've got...
Already sold out.
It's always sold out.
I know. I was like, I want to get one, and then it was sold out.
Then you've got JA by Jawara Alleyne, which is more of a streetwear offer, which I haven't really pushed. I mean, I haven't really pushed any of my work sales-wise outside of Untitled, because the brand kind of really picked up and took off from Untitled, and that's what people really wanted. So the other stuff I really haven't pushed that much. But next year we're going to see more of JA. And then you've got the artisanal range, which is essentially what I'm making for bespoke clients.
So speaking of bespoke clients and celebrity fans, the next piece that you've chosen is a piece that reminds you of a high. So I love this shoot so much. What have you chosen for this category?
So it was really interesting because the piece that I was gonna choose for the high was the finale look from Fashionista, but then I was like, wait a second, actually, this is even better because it's like a double entendre. So the piece that I chose was the blunt dress that I shot with Abe, Kamara, Raphael Pavarotti, Gareth for Dazed, shot on Rihanna. And it obviously reminds me of a high because it's a blunt, but also it reminds me of a high because that was I think the most culturally moving moment within my work so far. Like putting Rihanna in a blunt dress really kind of took over the cultural space.
I want to know the process behind it. So at what moment are you and Ib and Gareth together and you're like, we've got Rihanna, we're going to put her in a giant blunt? And then how do you communicate that to her and her team? And were you worried that she wouldn't be on board with it? What were those conversations like?
Well, so Abraham and Gareth kind of led those conversations because obviously at Days, they are planning all of the shoots between them before they even kind of figure out, okay, who's going to shoot what? They're like, okay, we're going to do Rihanna. This is what the concept is. This is what it's kind of like. And then they're sort of building that concept as they go. Then at some point they realize, okay, maybe it would be kind of a gag if we do something that's super out there. And then that's kind of when they come to me and they're like, we've got this idea. We're not really sure if it's going to work, but let's have a conversation. Then from there, I guess we kind of develop that dialogue of if something like this, like putting Rihanna in a bunch could work, like how can we make it? And then I just have to go off and just make the look and just make it fab. Obviously, there's like a back and forth of how they see it and how it kind of needs to read within the bigger picture of the story. Then once it's made, I'm not sure if they told her at all. Yeah. They just did it and they had it on set, and it was like she came on set and they were like, okay, we're gonna do something like this. Then they went through the looks and they showed it to her and she didn't say anything. And they weren't really sure if she was gonna wear it or not. And it was the last look of the day. Yeah. And they shot all the other looks, fab. Then they were like, and apparently she just got into it and it was fab. Amazing. Yeah, that is such an iconic fashion image from the last few years. And I think, just such a turning point, not only for obviously your brand, but just in general, I think, it was to be so editorial, so witty, so tongue-in-cheek. Yeah. It felt like the kind of thing that could really only happen in London. It can only happen in London. It could only happen once. It could only have been this team with this artist. Everything about it just felt so right and of its moment. And it's kind of crazy because there's no way to replicate that, And also, we didn't really know how it was going to be perceived as well, and if people were going to get it. It was kind of crazy how, for me, that was like one of the highest points in my career because of the cultural side of things that came alongside that. Obviously, because of the stereotypes and I guess the discourse that happens around the act of smoking a joint and how sort of like demonized it actually is for an entire culture. And to have that sort of representation is something that you can't replicate it, Like that was a moment in the career that I think like you just can't. How do you go beyond that? I feel like you have, but I guess I kind of have, but not in that way. Not in a way that sort of connects from so many different sides. You know what's funny is that this photo was before all of this AI technology came out, and now if you think about it, what would someone I don't know, say you're really stoned and you're like, oh my God, let's make it. Imagine if we made an image of like Rihanna in a blunt. But it's so crazy because this came before that. It was before that. Like, I think now you can't, just all of what that image meant in that moment, like, it was so of its time, of that week. So obviously that kind of started your relationship with Rihanna, who later, I think it was earlier this year, in an interview with Interview magazine, literally called you out as her favorite designer. So what does that kind of representation do for a business like yours? It placed a profile on the brand that made it such that you're just genuinely interested in whatever comes after that, As I said, I haven't really been focused on pushing my brand from a wholesale side of things. So having, I guess, Rihanna speak about the brand in this way, kind of, it gives you a sense of legitimacy that makes all the other small things that you do, it kind of gives them more of a sense of value than the top that she wore selling out. I think having Rihanna call me out as a favorite designer, it just makes you more intrigued to see what are the other, like why? Why is he her favorite designer?
That's the interesting thing you were talking about, a brand universe. Sometimes people will enter via the story. Sometimes people enter via a piece, like they just go into a shop and you're stocked there and they like it and then they discover the brand. Sometimes it's via celebrity, you know, Charlie XCX wears something and then people discover. So there's so many different ways that someone can enter the universe, and then it's like, how do you show them around the rest of the things? Exactly.
Because I think what you don't want is like a sensationalization of one moment or one thing or one product, because that is not true engagement with the work that I'm doing. You know, there's so many different things that the work is quite complex, and there's quite a number of different lines of research that exist within Jawara Alleyne, the brand. And I think I'm always very interested in figuring out how I can capture people's attention based on one avenue, but then keep their attention with all the other things that I'm doing.
Let's move from a high to a low. So the piece that reminds you of a low, what have you chosen here?
So the piece that I chose as a low, it was a low because basically, so at the end of 2020, I did Arise Fashion Week in Nigeria. And I went with 2 collections. And essentially how it was kind of relayed to me was that they were going to do 2 shows. And it was a competition. So you were going to do 2 shows, and after those 2 shows, they were going to select the winner. So I'd had 2 collections. One collection, which is the one that I showed, which was good, but the other one was so much better. And it was a low because the whole institution was so disorganized that they didn't end up doing the second shows. So they just basically, they just kind of ran out of time in the end, and they were just like, okay, we're not going to do the second shows, and we're just going to judge it based on the first shows. But the first show for me was just like an intro into the brand. It was still a fab collection, but the second one was just so much more exciting. And that was a low for me because I felt like I probably should have put my best foot forward and just showed the best collection first.
And what did you learn from that experience? Like, how did you...
Always put your best foot forward. Don't save the best for last.
Wear your nice clothes every day.
Wear your nice clothes every day.
Eat dessert first.
You know, like always put your best foot forward.
And then it was after that you joined Fashion East.
It was after that I joined Fashion East,
And Fashion East, for anyone that doesn't know, it's a talent incubator, and you get 3 seasons there, is that right? And it's really been this platform for like so many of all of the great designers to come out of the UK and further afield over the last, God, how long has it been going? 25 years.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Shout out Lulu Kendi and Raf.
Shout out Lulu Kendi and Raf.
This is quite a specific question, but I want to ask you about spirals. So circles and spirals come up a lot in your work, and this is a symbol that I don't know, it appears in art in lots of different ways. It means a lot of different things to different people. What does it mean to you?
So in the beginning, it was my reflection on the sun. So there's a lot of my work which is looking at Caribbean identity, Caribbean motifs. When I was starting out my journey in London, I was really, this is kind of, I guess, how I pulled my own culture out of punk. I was really interested in finding where are the spaces within this culture where I can find my own culture, and how can I, as a designer coming from the Caribbean, doing fashion research about my identity, but not having that much research documented to reflect on. So I had to find alternative ways to discuss and include and input motifs that comes from my culture that I think really defines how I think about the work and move through the world in general. And the sun was something that always came up, so much so that I actually recently released a book called Sun as an Anchor. And really what that explores not the book, but the sort of like reflection on the sun is how when you come from places where the sun shines for most of the year,
Not here.
not here. Yeah, I was kind of looking at how you have a really different relationship with your body, with the way that you move through the world when you come from a place where it's usually sunny versus when you come from a place where most of the time you're covered up. I think coming from the Caribbean, we have so much more of a sense of confidence that I don't find in the UK. When you come from the Caribbean, I think you have to quickly come to the terms with your body because you have to be comfortable wearing nothing in the blazing sun.
Because you can't cover it up.
Because you can't cover it up. So I think there's a sense of confidence that we innately have from coming from a place where you have to be comfortable in your skin, which is, I think, why I'm so excited by Caribbean women, which also is why somebody like Rihanna really means something to me. I think if it was any other celebrity, it wouldn't really mean that much, but I think for Caribbean women, you know, you carry yourself with such a sense of confidence that I think a lot of the world can learn from in how, you know, you develop a sense of self that is from you and not from the world telling you, oh, because you are not fitting into this category of size, that's like where your sense of self-worth is coming from. I think over time, the circularity and this kind of spiral motif has come to mean several different things. One also being the idea of the hurricane and I think the practice and process and the way that I move through this world is very much like a hurricane where you have that eye and in the center of the eye is me and I'm just constantly pulling various different lines of research or various different areas of interest or various different practices.
Into your orbit. You're just capturing us all and
literally
pulling us into the eye of the storm.
It's literally just a hurricane that I'm just pulling all of these things into the eye of the storm.
Let's move to the piece that makes you feel a part of something.
Yes.
So this is, a really iconic fashion photograph. Can you talk about this piece in this photo?
That piece was the finale look from McQueen SS 1999. I don't remember where I was the first time I saw that, but that really, I think, made me, at that time when I was kind of relating to it, or when I found it the first time, I think I really had a lot of feelings of like how fashion can be something more than just clothes on a runway.
Can you describe the image and what's happening?
So the image is that iconic look worn by Shalom Harlow where she's in that sort of white kind of shift dress, like A-line style dress, loads of volume with the belt that kind of cinches in the back. And then she walks out and there's like a turntable in the center that she comes and she stands on, and then you've got two robots on either side and they spray, I think, yellow and black paint, and that kind of creates the motif on the dress. Before we had these viral moments in fashion, like McQueen was already thinking like that. That feeling that you have where the entirety of the world that person has created, outside of the collection being beautiful, but the entire world that they present just makes you feel like you can see a path into the future. And that's kind of how that look makes me feel when I look at it. They often say that you can't create anything new in fashion, and I really disagree with that. I think you actually can, but it just hasn't been done yet, so it seems like we can't. You know? But there were moments where like something new was unlocked, and that was one of those moments. Definitely.
I think relating to feeling a part of something, I want to briefly touch on a few of your collaborators, partly because I'm fans of them as well. Can you talk about your relationship with Charlie Porter, the writer? I guess I should probably give a bit of context for the audience. So Charlie Porter is a writer. He, correct me if I'm wrong, he started as a fashion journalist. He worked at The Guardian for a long time. And then he's had this amazing evolution where now he still writes about clothes, but he's writing more in a sort of anthropological way about them. He's also started making his own clothes. He's kind of defected from fashion. You two have worked together on your show notes.
We didn't even start by him writing my show notes. We just started by him just meeting me, and he came to my house. I had like a little lounge chair that he would sit in, and it was almost like a therapy session where he would sit, he would ask me stuff about my work and record, and we would just talk. And then he was like, well, we should just make that into the show note. And that's kind of how we collaborated. It was really something that felt organic.
Secondly, I just want to touch on your relationship with Alva Clare, because also previous guest on Threads of Conversation and someone who you recently dressed for the British Fashion Awards. Can you talk about the process of designing and making that dress and the collaboration with her?
So I guess firstly, the collaboration with her, again, also kind of started from a friendship. Like I met Alva and I was like, this girl is just so incredible. She's just so, again, she's one of these Caribbean women that I am so enamored by and so excited to dress and to see exist, because they hold themselves with a sense of confidence that, you know, every day you walk into the world and they tell you, no, this is not how you are supposed to be, but that's just generally how you are. And there's like a sense of strength that I find from women who face the world like this. But I think our collaboration kind of started with a friendship that then just over time, we are always just trying to see how can we work together. And she is one of the muses that I'm always thinking about when I'm kind of projecting an idea of the ideal woman in physical form. So for the Fashion Awards, her style, I think we spoke about doing something in the run-up to the Fashion Awards, and at first it was supposed to be a after-party look, and then after we had various different conversations, I think Alva wanted something that felt very London, very punk, that had a sense of energy that kind of defies the red carpet itself. Again, deconstructing being within that space and how you are asked or forced to present, and sort of like really playing on those rules. And I guess that's what I do with my work. It's a lot about deconstructing, not deconstructing in the garment, even though, yes, that is there, but it's more deconstructing the entire system that you place that garment in. In terms of process, so when I'm working in the way that I usually work when I'm creating those more artisanal pieces, I really like to drape on the body. So with Alva, we had like 3 or 4 fittings where we draped, we tried things out, we put things on the body, we tested it, we asked her to move around and stuff. And it was like making a sculpture, really. You have your form and you're just creating on the form. And then you just create, you cut away, you pin, you cut, you put, you pin, until it feels right. And essentially that was the process.
It's kind of crazy because it's like you're even then bringing in another side of history, because it's that sort of wet drapery thing. You know, when you think about classical sculpture and these sort of draped forms and the way that sculptors used to do that to get inspirations, they would literally get like wet fabric and they would drape it on a model.
Yes.
Let's move to your next piece. So this is the piece that reminds you of a great party. And I want to talk about this because I guess it kind of also relates back to something that makes you feel a part of a certain community. So what have you chosen for this category?
So the image that I chose was a look that Ibrahim shot he styled on himself, shot by Kristen Lieberman. It was Ibrahim in a wedding dress, like full white wedding dress look. And the look that really sparked the memory is not that look, but it's the look that was the predecessor of the look that he shot. Basically, there was a party in London called PDA that was honestly the best party that existed in London, still has not been matched, just because of the energies of who was involved and the community that they were able to bring together. It was Misha Notcott, Craig Stevens or Akin, and Miss Carrie Stacks, and together, them sort of being the 3 forces behind PDA, they managed to bring together a community that really felt it really felt unlike any other space that you would exist in London. I think because there were so many cross sections and crossovers, and essentially everyone was there, you know. You had the girls, you had the mandem, you had the roadmen, you had like the trans girls, like you had like everybody was like kind of within this sort of space of coming together. And Also, the music was incredible. They would have all the best DJs.
Misha is like the best DJ in London.
Just so phenomenal. I have not heard music being played to that level to this day. It was just so good. But anyway,
such a birthplace for so much of the sort of fashion industry in London that we see now. And actually, you're the second person to talk about it on the podcast because Claire Berman came on.
Right.
And she was talking about it as the place where she really met everyone that she then started working with as a producer when she first came to London. And I guess same for you.
Yeah, totally. I think, that was really a place where creativity was thriving. It really was. And you would frequently get dressed up to go. Like I was working at this designer at Peter Pilotto at that time, and we would be working like super late sometimes, like finishing work at 11 p.m., 12 p.m., and then I would just run home, make a quick look, and then run to the party. That was kind of the energy that you were in at that time. And there was one time when Ibrahim just turned up in a wedding gown, and it was like the full ensemble. He was like trained down the end of the street. He came with an umbrella. It was such a moment. It reminds me of a great party. It was that look, because on one side, it really makes me feel a part of the creative space of fashion, because a lot of the people that move through that space are now leaders within their field in the industry, whether it's casting, it's styling, it's hair, it's makeup, it's design, like a lot of the people that we look on in London fashion space and also in Paris and Milan were people that actually came out of that party. And a lot of their success, I don't know if you could say it could be attributed to, but had a lot to do with the people that we were brushing shoulders against and the ways of thinking about fashion and the ways of thinking about identity that we were all kind of bringing together and kind of sharing, and having Ibrahim turning up in a wedding dress, and then Gareth, and then me, and then Campbell, and like all these people that were just so excited to be in a space where you could feel comfortable enough to go there. I think that is really where we developed a sense of confidence in who we were and what we bring to the industry. And you really see like everyone who has left that space taking that confidence on with them and being able to enter into spaces where you're kind of the only one that really looks like you, but it doesn't really make you feel any less than. It's interesting because like when I was going to PDA, the stuff that I'm making now is kind of, I would make that kind of stuff and go to the party. Like I would just like grab some scraps of fabric and just make a dress and make a top, and that was my look, And I didn't really think too much about it because I was not interested in that process as I didn't give it that value, the value that I place in my work now of like using safety pins and making sure that, my work feels like it's clearly been made by hand, like that's a very intentional thing now, because I now understand the value of me looking at all of these European designers and thinking that that my work had to look like theirs in order to be good. But now I realize that actually there's different ways to evaluate what is good, and it's so important for me to lean on what I've always done, because you already arrive being ready. You just need to hone those skills.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? How I feel like so often you feel like you have to learn like the right way to do it, or you have to prove yourself to other people before you can rely on yourself. But then you usually go back to your instinct of what you were doing before. All it does is basically makes you realize that like, oh, I went all the way there and I actually don't need that. What I was doing before was good anyway. I just needed to kind of compare it almost. Yeah.
I think once you also get to the point where you realize that actually you can do what they can do, but what you do is way more interesting.
I want to move on to your next piece. So this is the piece that makes you feel sexy. So what have you chosen for this category?
Okay, so I chose a pair of denim jeans from Island Underground, my last collection. And I kind of struggled finding a piece that made me feel sexy, because I think my idea of sexiness just comes from me. Like it's like this idea that you build when you come from places where it's always sunny, where like we basically don't wear anything. But those jeans, like every single person that I've put those jeans on, I'm like, damn, those jeans are sexy. There's something about this silhouette that I've been playing with in menswear that next year I want to explore more, where, you know, you have broad shoulders. It's kind of like a women's wear silhouette, actually, that I'm pulling over into menswear, where you have broad shoulders, small waist, and then broader at the bottom. There's something that I find to be really sexy about that hourglass type silhouette on a man. And I think those jeans really kind of gives you that cinch in the waist and then kind of teeter at the bottom type vibe. But the jeans is just fab, and everybody that I put them on, it was like hot.
I want to ask you, so I've got a list here. I mean, it's not exhaustive, but of, you know, pop princesses, essentially, that have worn your work. You've got Rihanna, Georgia Smith, Shy Girl, Dua Lipa, Flo, Ray, Thames, Tyler, and Kylie have all been seen in your pieces recently. What do you think is the appeal for the sort of performer, these kind of women?
I think right now where my work is, in one side, it gives women a sense of confidence about how can you cut something that sits on the body in a way that makes a woman feel confident in her body, revealing but not revealing. I think it's like these areas of play that showed up in my earlier works when things were a lot more skimpy and a lot more sexy and a lot more youthful, but now it's moving into a territory which still carries that essence on, but it's less about sexiness and more about confidence. And also in the way that it's cut and the way that the garments kind of like flow around the body, whether it's something that's tight or loose or long or short or whatever. Like, I think there's always something that gives a woman a sense of confidence, which I think maybe has a lot to do with the movement that exists within my garment. It's not like the European, but like more tailored way of cutting, where the garment is an armor. You step into the armor, it stays exactly like you've designed it, it doesn't move. I think a lot of what I'm creating are garments that move around the body. It's constantly, it has a life. Like when you move, the skirt is swinging that way and then it's swinging that way. And I think women, you know, you kind of live in your body in a different way when something is moving around you. And it gives you a different sense of confidence that I find. And I think that's what people are drawn to.
Well, I think it's that thing as well, historically, not to get too much on my like feminist rant, but if you think about women traditionally, everyone's like, stay there, go there, be there, enclosed there, sort of it was very much about being closed away or stationary or not seen or obedient, and this idea of being emotion, being dynamic, being unpredictable, because that's the thing, which way is it going to move?
Exactly.
You don't know.
Exactly.
That is a very empowering vibe. We're up to your last piece. So this is the one that got away. So what is the piece that got away?
So the piece that got away is a puffer jacket that Peter Pilato made, and I was always so obsessed with that garment, and I left and I should have stole it. I really should have.
So you were
stole
working
that
for
jacket.
Peter Pilato?
I was working for Peter Pilato. And really, I think that they had the best prints in the game, hands down. Like, over the span of their career, they really created a body of work that I think is unrivaled when it comes to the experimentation that they did in print and textiles. And honestly, I think I really have a good knowledge and understanding and quality of texture, textile, fabrics, color, because I worked for them. They were doing so many experiments within the studio. Yeah, that puffer jacket was so fab. It was so fab.
It's kind of like purple and...
It has like the motifs of like an alpine, like mountain range with like snow on it. But it feels a little bit anime. It feels a little bit cartoon. The print language, like it's almost like this AI image that kind of borders a real, like a pictured image and a digital image somehow. And I think they were really doing a lot of experimentation within this world before, like way before we even got into this realm of digital and AI that we're in now.
It's funny, isn't it? It was really an era for prints. I feel like you had Peter and then also Mary Katrantzou was doing, that Greek designer, she was doing amazing prints. Even you look at early Christopher Kane, like those digital prints on chiffon and stuff.
But they started it.
Yeah, you're like Peter.
They started it. I remember they won Designer of the Year in the year that I started working with them. Their work really revolutionized digital printing, but it was at the same time where Mary was coming up, Christopher, you had Roxanda, you had Erdem. So all of this investment that they were doing into manufacturing processes, I think the factories were willing to do it because there was a few designers that would be coming for similar things. But I think they really had their finger on the pulse. Yeah, I think there was a lot of garments from their work that kind of got away, that I'm like, damn, nobody has ever done anything like that and probably never will.
Well, Jawara, thank you so much for sharing your threads of conversation.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Threads of Conversation. You can find pictures of Jawara's chosen pieces in the accompanying newsletter, which is linked in the show notes. And if you enjoyed the episode, then don't forget to like and subscribe on your chosen platform.